Okay, welcome to the latest edition of Ed Talks, the property podcast. And my guest today is someone who came in very early on in the series, but was somewhat drowned out by the voluble Mr. Henry Pryor, who a lot of you know. And I have to say, informed opinions on a lot of things. But one of the things that I intended to talk about at the time was the introduction of residential investment trusts, real estate investment trusts, and the lettings market in general. And what I want to do now is I've got Tom Tennant with me, who was there on that first podcast, but is very much someone who's been at the forefront of what's happening with changes in buy-to-let legislation and trying to adapt to them. And let's start with some figures here. If you're a landlord with a portfolio that's earning you 100,000, just because it's a round figure, the income you would have been getting 2 years ago from that would have been about 27,000. And within a couple of years, that would have halved. So, the effects if you're a landlord owning an individual property are going to be very significant. The chances are you'll probably be in arrears. We also have potential changes to evictions and Section 21. You've got extra stamp duty payable. And Tom Tennant, as I say, who's with me here, is the Chief Executive of Somerset Estates REIT, which I think I'm right in saying, Tom, was the last listed REIT.
Yes, it was. Yeah, hi, Ed. Yes, so we listed in just before Christmas into 2017, so about 18 months or so ago. And as far as I'm aware, no REITs have listed since, which is quite unusual, 18, especially in over 18-month period. Not sure why that is, if it's the sign of Brexit or people deciding to do other things, but I think it shows there's a bit of volatility out there.
Well, can you tell us why you? Because I know you and your family spent quite a lot of money doing this, and your father started a portfolio a very long time ago and has built this up. So why did you go down the REIT route?
So my dad set Somerset Estates up, Limited up in 1981. He was an estate agent in South Kent, had his own agency. I think you knew him back in the day.
Indeed.
And then they sort of built this portfolio up, buying properties in London where he knew well. Wish he'd kept a few of them, sold them before they went a bit crazy. I joined in 2011. My background is I have a real estate management degree from university and worked for a company called Landlords for 4 years. I then spent 6 months doing something else, then came back into the property world. And since then, we've been focusing on yield, so buying stuff outside London. So we've got a lot of things down in Margate, Kent Way, Ramsgate, down that part of the world where we were getting yields of 10-12%. Since we've been buying, prices have come up a little bit, so it's not quite as good, but we're still getting at least double, maybe treble what we would in London for the price. So that's what we've been doing since then. The idea for REITs came into the UK whilst I was at university in 2007, so we studied them obviously, and I've always thought it was a good idea. In particular, I think the idea behind REITs is that it's sort of indirect investment in property. So that the whole point is that shareholders still benefit from investment in property, all the upsides, all the income and everything, but they haven't got to worry about all the hassle. And one of the extra good things about REITs is that they have to pay out 90% of their profits to shareholders. So shareholders will get an income from a REIT. It's a guaranteed dividend every year, as long as there's a profit, obviously. So that's indirect investment in property. So the landlord still benefit that way. The reason we decided to become a REIT was because of the tax changes that were brought in by the previous government in 2015, which take away the mortgage interest relief. So Section 24 of the 2015 Finance Act, which, as you say, will halve landlords' incomes over the next couple of years from what they were. So we launched this REIT with the idea to speak to landlords and tell them what's going on and tell them about a REIT, and then buy their properties from them. Rather than give them cash, we would give them shares in the REIT. So say you've got a portfolio worth £5 million, we'll give you £5 million worth of shares in our REIT. And that way you haven't got to worry about all the Section 24 tax changes, all the management hassle, all the extra legislation that's going on at the moment. It's just getting harder and harder to be a landlord, and you'll be part of a much larger pool of properties. So your risk is diversified, and ideally the risk is spread over everything. So we launched in 2017, end of 2017, and spent last 18 months trying to get the word out to landlords and spreading the message and saying what's going on. One thing we've been amazed by is how few landlords know about these tax changes. There was a survey even recently that said I think 25% of landlords don't know about the Section 24 tax changes and the impact that it's going to have on them. So we've spoken to thousands of landlords on the internet and at trade shows, and face-to-face meeting them via introductions, and we've basically told them about these tax changes, and they've sort of gone off and spoken to their accountant, and they're having a think about what to do and figure out what to do going forward. I don't think the penny has fully dropped yet. They are being phased in, obviously, so it's started in 2018 and it'll be fully implemented 2021, after which there'll be no relief on your mortgage interest, so your full income will be taxed. So an example you cited, the £100,000 income, say it's £100,000, your mortgage is say £40,000 a year. Previously you were only taxed on the £60,000 profit, obviously minus costs, etc. But going forward you'll be taxed on the full £100,000 income, so your tax bill will double, more or less.
So in terms of setting up the REIT, let's assume that property was held, or the income was coming from the REIT. Mm-hmm. What would the changes mean if the property was in a REIT? So let's look at the bald figures for that.
So ideally, there shouldn't be much change. So on the figures I've worked out, the income on that sort of £100,000 property previously, before all the tax changes, was about £27,000 a year. If they were in the REIT, the income, give or take, were about £32,000 a year, so even higher than it was previously. And
it would stay like that throughout the tax changes?
It would stay like that,
It wouldn't alter?
It wouldn't alter.
Okay, so it's a way for landlords to protect their income. Mm-hmm. That £100,000, presumably, how much of that £100,000 is a mortgage? Did you say it was £60,000?
So more in this example, the mortgage is £40,000 a year, so profit after mortgage, £60,000.
Okay, so the reason you did it was to protect the income from the property, effectively.
Well, we were already. So the interest relief is only for individual landlords, not for companies. So we already held the properties within a company.
So why doesn't everyone just switch to putting it in a company then?
Because of it, if you do that, there are a few ways to go about it. But if you do that, you're effectively selling the properties to the company, so the new company has to pay stamp duty on those properties for a start, and obviously have the extra 3% which they bought in 2016, but also you might have to pay some capital gains tax on that on when you do the swaps.
Okay, so the initial costs are higher. What about further down the line?
So further down the line, then obviously you have accountancy fees and everything like that. You still have the hassle of managing the properties. So even if you can get past all the tax changes when you do move the properties over into an incorporated company, you then have all the talk of Section 21 being removed. There's all these right to rent issues going on at the moment, which they might keep or they might get rid of.
Well, we'll come to that in a minute. I'm trying to look at the basic monetary value, because most landlords, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is of accidental landlords out there, but an awful lot of people, and there are 4.5 million landlords out there. They do it partly because since 2007-8 they've had absolutely no other way of getting any income.
Yep.
So, and a lot of people hold properties for all sorts of reasons. They take the income now, they might move into them when they're older, their kids might move into them. There are lots of reasons people hold them, but it's the money that matters.
Yep.
If their property isn't going to be working for them or making money, they're going to trade. They may change their minds, and a lot of people apparently are thinking about selling up. Mm-hmm. So if this is a way of stopping that, so what I'm interested to know about is the money. So if you incorporate, if you put it into a company, you've got the upfront costs.
Yep.
And then down the line, if you come to sell, are there extra tax implications that you wouldn't have with a REIT?
Obviously, there's the corporation. So REITs, one other thing about REITs I should have mentioned is we pay no corporation tax on
Okay,
obviously
that's quite a big point.
So that's quite a big point. Yeah, I missed that.
Which is at the moment?
It's 19% at the moment. It is coming down, but I think it's
that's still a sizable,
17%.
still a sizable chunk.
So obviously, if we ever sell a property, then we save the capital gains tax. For example, we exchanged on a property yesterday, which my father bought 33 years ago for £25,000, and we're selling it for £440,000. So quite a large uplift there. And on that one, I think we're saving about, off the top of my head, about £70,000 of capital gains tax.
Wow.
Which we can then reinvest into other properties and refurbish some things and everything like that. So that's one other big advantage for REITs is we don't have to consider.
So would that work, Tom, for older properties? So if you were someone who'd owned a property like your father has since 1981 or something, which you bought for 25 grand and it's now worth 400,000. If you transferred that property into the REIT and then sold it, you wouldn't pay the corporation tax.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow. Okay. That's a very significant point.
So especially in London, obviously there's quite a few low yielding properties in London that are worth a lot of money because of the price increases. So if we did a share swap, we bought those properties for shares, we can then sell them and reinvest in high yielding places such as Margate or wherever. So that's one of the key advantages, especially, as you say, especially for high value properties.
So I mean, we were talking briefly before we came on air, and you've been very candid about all this, and the fact is that you found getting individual landlords to put their properties in is difficult.
Yes,
it's not happening easily. I mean, my experience, which is very long of dealing with individual landlords, is that they're, what's the right word? Control freaks is a bit strong, but they like to be in control of their own lives. So is that an issue here, that people perhaps don't like ceding control to someone else?
I think that has been an issue. Obviously, you get into property, people invest in properties, they like touching the asset, they see it and everything like that. So what we said to quite a few landlords is if they manage the properties themselves, self-manage the properties, they can continue managing the properties going forward.
Okay, so if people put their properties into the REIT, they can continue the management. If there was an estate agent, for instance, who had some landlords and was saying, and the landlord was thinking of selling, and for a lot of estate agents, the income they get from lettings is really good business. So they're quite keen to hang on to their landlords. One of the options a landlord might have, an estate agent might have, is to turn around to the landlord and say, well, why don't you consider putting your properties into a REIT? You can keep the income. And of course, they can then carry on getting the income from the management of it.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, well, that's also a big deal for estate agents.
We'll also, obviously pay some intro fees potentially and everything like that. So if there is an estate agent who introduces...
That's enough of the hard sell, Tom.
Yes,
okay,
sorry, I'll stop.
No, but seriously, I do think there is a... it's big news at the moment, this issue, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fact that there are alternatives. I think most people think that the incorporation route is the only route they have open to them.
Yes.
And certainly my understanding of REITs always was that there were these great big monolithic things run by some face in the city, and they were only interested in £50 million investments. But everyone has to start somewhere. And so coming back to what I was saying a couple of minutes ago, that you were candid with me that landlords have sort of struggled to come to terms with this. So where do you see the growth at the moment? I mean, in terms of landlords, maybe the pain isn't enough for them yet, because I would have thought it's only in their recent tax returns that these changes are suddenly becoming really obvious. So is it, do you think, a question of educating landlords and waiting for them? Are you looking for other sources of income? What is your sort of strategy at the moment?
I think it's educating landlords. I think it's landlords we've spoken to have said their accountants haven't mentioned this to them, which is, I find, a bit unusual. So I think any landlord listening the first point of call is to speak to your accountant and have a chat with them and figure out what the best options are. Obviously, I think what we're providing is the best option, but there might be something else that's more suited. We are also, because we haven't really been able to find too many landlords as yet, we are thinking of going down the traditional route and doing some fundraising. So if there's any landlords who are thinking of potentially purchasing a property for the first time or whatever, we're looking to raise equity to go and buy properties. So rather than putting a couple of £100,000 into a 2-bed flat somewhere, come and have a chat with us and we can see if we can take that and put it elsewhere and
yes, because one thing people mustn't ever underestimate is the power of experience. I mean, I know we don't necessarily want to talk about age, but your father's been doing this for very long. How old is your father now?
He is 77 this year and started when he was 16, so a long time.
So and my memory of Peter, your father, is that he's a proper straight down the line guy. So putting funding something like this, which is being managed and run by people who really know what they're talking about. I mean, I guess the thing is that it's one of those sort of things that it's great while it's your own portfolio. I would assume that once these sort of things grow to a certain size, they need to be, don't take this the wrong way, but professionalised. They're going to need to have a big name somewhere over the door or something that says, yes, we're managing this. You can't have it's a lovely idea to do it in-house with lots and lots of small estate agents managing their own portfolios. But one of the other things that I never fully understood about REITs, well, you can tell me, you can clarify it for me, is that, of course, aren't there two methodologies with this? Because one or two sources of income. One is that you've got the ability for landlords to continue to get an income in a tax-efficient way from their properties if they put them into a REIT. But if the REIT gets big enough and it moves onto a more tradable platform, so AIM or Next, whatever it is, and the units of that REIT have a value, if people see those units and this as being a well-performing REIT, those units then go up in value as well. So not only do you continue to get the income from the value, so let's say you put £100,000 into the REIT, you get the income from it, which would be a yield of...
We're targeting about 6-7% yield going forward. 6
or 7%, which even in the old days, pre-2007, would have been a reasonable yield. Of course, if that's what you're getting now, then that's staggering compared to 0.1% of whatever people get in the bank. But of course, then you have the upside of the REIT. So that is a potential benefit down the line.
Yes, of course. And also, the shares in the REIT can be held in ISAs, so they're tax protected there, and also in pensions. And obviously one of the benefits of a REIT is the liquidity. If you've got a £200,000 house, you can't sell £15,000 worth. But if you have £200,000 of shares in us, you could in theory sell £15,000
That's a very good
worth
point,
of shares.
actually. It tends to be a SH1T or bust if you have your own house. That's
Exactly.
it, you sell the whole thing. So that's a very good point. You can drip your... Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, the thing is, when we sit here and talk about it like this, you sort of wonder why everyone isn't doing it. And one of the things that I would suppose from your own point of view has been, what's the right word? One of the things holding you back is that you've very much been doing it yourself. You've been trying to run this very skinny and do it yourself. We've spoken often in the past about it. And do you think that it's one of those sort of things that requires a huge marketing spend, or is it just a sort of gentle education thing? I mean, what if you could wave a magic wand about, what would you do to try and get everyone to say, yeah, this is the way forward?
We'd love to spend it, have a large marketing budget to spread the word. But I think what we like to do is get out there and meet landlords and face to face. I mean, property is a people's business, so we like to talk to people, and I think landlords need to trust if they're doing a share swap, they need to trust us. So a large marketing campaign might work, but then I think it's getting out there and meeting people, really, which we educating everybody. And also we do believe in trying to keep as much money in the company as possible. So obviously we want to pay out as high as dividends as we can. So we're looking to restrict marketing a little bit, but we do want to get the message out there. So it's trying to be clever and using social media and everything like that to spread the word and tell everyone what's going on. But I think educating landlords is key to this, and telling everybody about these tax changes and how it's going to affect them going forward, and what the numbers are, really.
Okay, so what are the other things that because your family owns a portfolio of properties, you're probably as aware of anybody as to what you think the risks are at the moment. So there are all sorts of things going on. So talk us through the current... We've talked about the tax changes. What else is coming up to bash landlords?
So the big thing at the moment, which is in the press, is obviously Section 21 removal. So
Section 21 is...
Section 21 is if you have technically a no-fault eviction. So if you have a tenant and you want the possession of the property back, you serve the Section 21 notice. They have 2 months' notice to move out, and then you have the property back. So this could be either if you want to move back in, you want to sell it, they haven't been paying the rents, or there are other options for that, or you want to refurbish the property, or whatever you want to do. But the problem with Section 21 is it's taken a long time. It takes a long time to evict a tenant. We've recently had a case where it was taking us 7 months to get the property back off a tenant who's not been paying rent. So we had to go to court and all that stuff, which is a very long time.
And expensive, actually.
Yeah, and expensive, all the court costs and everything like that. And if you get something wrong as well, you have to start all over again. So if there's a problem with the notice, then it gets rejected and you have to start the whole process again. But the government have announced they are removing Section 21. They haven't announced what they're replacing it with yet. So we're in that grey, well, not black area really, where we don't know what's going on going
So
forward.
does that mean if they revoke Section 21, does that mean it goes back to relying on Section 8?
Potentially.
Okay. Which is, so Section 8 is...
Section 8 is if a tenant is in arrears, there have to be 2 months in arrears, you serve them Section 8 notice, and in theory it's much quicker to get possession of the property back. However, the tenant has to be in 2 months of arrears. If they pay 1 month off, then they're no longer in 2 months of arrears, so Section 8 won't work. That is a more costly process than Section 21. So that's those are the two options really. If you haven't got the tenant paying rent or you want possession back, they did in Scotland. They got removed Section 21 a couple of years ago, and everyone was up in arms about it. But they were very clear about what they're replacing it with, and from what the research I've done and from what I've read, it's gone down quite well. But obviously, in England and Wales at the moment, we don't know what they're replacing it with. So it could be a good thing.
I mean, the trouble is everyone always looks at worst case scenarios, and of course most landlords want tenants to stay in the property for as long as possible, but equally the UK, or certainly the England and Wales market, is a what's the right word, it's a victim of its own success in some ways, in that property's been seen as a good investment, and a lot of people who own properties, as I alluded to earlier in this podcast, don't own properties necessarily just for the income. Indeed, certainly at Douglas and Gordon in the old days, the wonderful Catherine Alabaster, who used to run our letting side, used to persuade people to invest in bricks and mortar and just say it was for the long term, and it was all about capital growth. It wasn't about income. And of course, these days people do look at real estate investments as part of their income portfolio. But a lot of the people that own properties these days have other reasons. So have other reasons for doing so, i.e. they want to live in them eventually, they want their kids to move into them, they didn't have anything else to put the money in, and they may need the money at some point. So do you have any feel for perhaps for how many people might exit the market if Section 21 was revoked and had to go back to something like Section 8?
Well, there's been lots of I think it's too early to tell on Section 21, but I think there's been lots of research on landlords thinking to sell at the moment. I think it's off the top of my head, I can't remember the stat exactly, but there's a large number of landlords who are thinking of selling. I think it's about 25%.
I was going to say, I think the figures I've read are about 25%, but you never quite know how much of that is awfulization by the industry.
Of course, yeah, you've got to be careful on that, yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people who have the money in property still worry about longer term income. And of course, the Bank of England haven't helped, I don't think, because they keep talking about putting interest rates up. And I've been saying for ages to people that interest rates aren't going to go up for years and years and years. But they keep pulling this lever of saying, we might put interest rates up. And then people slightly freak out about their mortgages and they think, I better sell. But the truth of the matter is that there's going to be very little else for people to get income from in the foreseeable future. And property continues to be a sensible way of doing that. So I think anything that... And I don't think this is getting around it. I mean, I think that certainly I used to think of REITs as I said, of these big monolithic things that were invented by frightfully clever people who wanted to avoid. They had the sort of whiff of avoidance and evasion about them, which is simply not true. I mean, REITs are now all over the world, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they started in America 30, 40 years ago, and as I said, they came into the UK in 2007. But I think there's 30, 40 countries around the world that have REITs, Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, France, I think, Holland, lots of countries have them now. So it's a regular thing. The whole point behind them, and the reason the UK government brought them in, was to encourage smaller landlords, I think, to invest in property, indirect investment in property in a much larger company, and try to professionalise the industry a little bit. So you move away from the small landlord to in theory, a much better managed property company. So
was that a sort of progenitor, do you think, of the sort of build to rent type view? I mean, do you think that REITs might be a good vehicle for buying up a big development and letting all of the properties out?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think we've certainly had chats with a few developers about doing something along those lines, potentially buying 10% of their development or something like that, or looking to forward fund things. I do think that's the way forward. Build to rent is obviously the big thing at the moment. Everyone's talking about it. When you think of build to rent, you always think of these big tower blocks and big blocks of flats, but I think it also extends to smaller developments of houses, family houses, dotted all over the country. I think that probably is one of the way forwards of build to rent, and when it fully comes in, because obviously we're copying a little bit from the American model. with multifamily housing and single-family housing. And obviously, at the moment, we're focusing on the blocks of flats. But, as I say, I think the small developments are probably the way forward, really. So that's something we're definitely looking at the moment.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's an extraordinary area. I really hope that some of what we've been talking about this morning has helped inform people about the options, really, because I still maintain, I'm fascinated to hear you say that the first thing that a lot of landlords will do is go and talk to their accountants. I mean, obviously that tells us that this is purely a financial exercise for a lot of these people. And if it's purely a financial exercise, why wouldn't you do something which looks after your money more efficiently? Yeah. So it must come back to this thing about control and wanting to have your property individually. And I'm guessing that there's a little bit of a catch-22 for you as a relatively new REIT, in that presumably you need to build up to a certain level before it starts to become effective. So it's getting over that first hurdle. So there has to be a really big advantage, I would have thought, for someone to come to you guys and say, right, let's do a deal here, and let's help get you over the line.
Definitely.
Is that something you're willing to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. So if someone comes along who's got a relatively large portfolio, we might pay them a little bit more or something like that, or give them some options, or we're open to any sort of solution at the moment to have a chat with them. We have this platform. We think it's a good way forward for landlords, especially the larger landlords. And it's especially beneficial if you own more than 5 properties. You should be able to swap your properties into the REIT with paying no capital gains tax. So you only pay capital gains tax if you eventually sell your shares in the REIT. That's based on a HMRC versus Ramsey case in 2013, which said Ramsey owned 5 properties, and they claimed they ran it as a business. And HMRC said, no, you don't. And then the judge ruled that, yes, it counts as a business if you own more than 5 and you spend a certain number of hours managing it every week. So in those situations, landlords qualify for that. There's even more benefits for them to swap in. So we can have a chat with them about all the different options out there.
Okay. And I suppose one of the other benefits is that if you don't sell your shares in the REIT for some time, you can set off your annual allowance against it. So you can build it up like that. Okay. Well, look, Tom, thanks for coming in. I mean,
Thank you.
I've tried to talk around the subject. I think for clarity, people know I am a non-exec on the REIT, so it's not something which being a non-exec means I am sort of I stand back and look at these things, but it's been fascinating, and I don't have anything to do with the day-to-day running of it. So therefore I've had an unusual insight into what the difficulties have been for you, and I think it's extraordinary that no one else has done it. I think to be doing this as a purely residential exercise is unusual. I think the potential for landlords is huge, but it's one of those sort of things where you're in that classic catch-22. It's like the person asking for the job. Well, have you got any experience? No. You can't get, very frustrating. I know the frustrations you've had and the amount of hard work you've put into this. But I would urge anybody who's got any questions at all, what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
So via our website, really, we've got all the information on there. I've written a few blogs about issues that landlords are facing. And the website it's a bit of a long one. It's Somerset Estates REIT.co.uk, and REIT is spelled REIT.
Okay, that's somersetestatesreit.com.
.co.uk.
Okay. Well, look, Tom, thank you very much for coming in. And I think at a time when landlords feel really under pressure, let's hope that this is something which people look into a little bit more. I think it can be of huge benefit. And there's also that feeling, I think, a little bit here of, what's the right word, of everyone feeling like they're in this together. I think if a lot of landlords put their properties into something like this, there is a slight feeling of, well, there's safety in numbers.
Yes, well, that's one thing we're quite keen to develop, a sort of community of landlords. So if a landlord does do a swap and they introduce it to someone else, then we might pay them an intro fee, but we want sort of a community for landlords where everyone's sort of working together to build this thing, rather than just us. We sort of see we've set this vehicle up, and we see it very much as a vehicle rather than sort of a boat or ship or whatever for everyone to get on board. And
it's quite an expensive ship. You're being very modest there. I mean, setting up and doing all the legislative changes, it
took a lot. Well, it was more the time than the money, really. It did cost a bit, but
it cost a bit. I mean, it was well into 6 figures. So it's not a modest cost. So
no.
I think for a lot of people, having it already set up is a big benefit. Okay, well, look, Tom, massive thank you for coming in and talking about it, and
Thank
being
you for
so
your time.
candid about it. And I think for those listening out there, whether you're an agent, whether you're a property manager, or whether you're a landlord, I would urge people to have a look at this, because I think it is something which is of its time and will be a very good way of continuing to receive an income in a way that perhaps is more efficient than what, as you said, the figures there show that actually the income you'll be getting if your property was held as shares in a REIT would be more than it would have been before, let alone post all these Section 24 changes. So thanks very much for coming in, Tom.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you.